Vegandale, Toronto 2023. There's so much controversy surrounding this year's event and I wanted to jump in and give my 2 cents. Before we jump in, I'm so excited to announce that I will be at Vegandale, LA. So if you want to see that content, be sure to subscribe and follow my socials so you don't miss out on that. All right, let's jump into the video. So I actually ran into a vegan friend and her husband while I was parking in the venue, and we walked in the event together, and he had mentioned that he was a bit disappointed with the venue because the VIP and the general section were very separated. I was so happy that I arrived early, and I would definitely recommend it because it allowed me to find hassle-free parking. And also, once I got into the venue, there were essentially no lines to begin with, which was amazing. Just a disclosure, I do want to keep in mind that I did have media passes. Obviously, I know that not everyone has a media pass. Media passes allegedly let you skip lines at some vendors, even though I tried it one time and she looked at me like I was crazy. Also with media passes, I could go anywhere, which was really cool. I am not sponsored by Vegandale, unfortunately. Hopefully I will be in the future, but this is not sponsored. All opinions are my own, but I did just want to mention that I had a media pass, so my experience is going to be different than everyone else in the general sections. The venue was pretty cool. It did offer an amazing view of the CN Tower, and it was also in front of the water, which was really cool when the sun went down because you were able to see the city reflecting off of the water. My initial concern with the venue when walking in was that there was no shade really. So as someone who literally swells up in the sun, I noticed this right away, and I think that could be very frustrating, especially because the venue was on pavement, so that gets even hotter. So that was a downside for sure. Moving on to the crowd's energy, I think it's just something about vegans that are like extra compassionate, obviously, towards animals. I think that usually translates into how they treat people as well, because the energy was amazing. Everyone was really kind. I was able to speak to people pretty freely, make friends pretty freely, and everybody kept complimenting my outfit, which was really cool because I had actually made the crochet top myself. It was the first thing I ever crocheted, so that made me really happy as well. I actually made friends with a few people there and spent a lot of time with them, and those weren't even the original people that I had went with, so it was cool to be able to make more friends, and everybody was very friendly in my experience. The VIP experience in Cabana was amazing. The vibe was great, and I had never been to Cabana, and I really liked the aesthetic of it all. I thought it was brilliantly planned for a VIP section. To be perfectly honest, having experienced VIP but also the general section, I could not imagine this event without the VIP, or like having access to the VIP. And I say that because essentially you only had access to water, shade, seating, and a clean washroom if you were in VIP, which is insane. And I'll talk about that more later, but definitely keep that in mind. It's obviously a problem because everybody still paid money to get into the event, and to go and pay money for a ticket and then spend even more money on food. I could see how it would be a bit frustrating to not have access to some of those basic things. My group and I got to the VIP section pretty early, which was great because we were able to take some pictures before it got completely overcrowded by people. With that being said, my main concern within VIP was that the music was literally so loud you could not hear someone talking that was right beside you. After the event, my voice was a little strained. I found that particularly frustrating because basically the only seating was in VIP, so I don't know where else you were supposed to sit down and kind of chat with the people you came with while actually being able to hear them, so that was a bit frustrating for me. Another concern was that you had to like wait in line for VIP. It took a while for them to actually open up the VIP section, which was a bit weird because you paid extra to be there, so it was kind of weird that you had to wait in line and it opened later than the actual event, which was kind of strange. So I would definitely change that in the future. I feel like if anything, VIP should open first so you can go and get yourself settled and then kind of migrate and find your way into the general section for food. I enjoyed the vendor options overall, but I was a bit overwhelmed by the overall selection. Majority of the vendors were kind of like a vegan junk food vibe, and don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the occasional vegan junk food, but especially on such a hot day, I found myself craving something nice, light, and fresh, and I kind of had a harder time finding that, which was a bit frustrating. If you couldn't already tell, food is always a highlight of these events. It's why I keep going back year and year after already being there. So of course, when I first got there, I noticed this vendor called Bring Me Some, and their line is always huge. Like last year, it was the biggest line at Vegandale. So when I first got there, I got there early and there was nobody in line. So I was really happy about that. I was able to order and get my food very quickly, which I loved. So I would definitely recommend showing up as early as possible. I'm giving the Bring Me Some food a solid 9 out of 10, and I only deducted a point because there were a few fries in the selection that I got which were like overwhelmingly salty, and I'm not even being dramatic. It was actually pretty weird. I think something just went wrong. Like it was their first few orders of the day, so something wasn't quite right there, but overall it was still really good. Later on around 2 p.m. I was actually craving something more light and fresh because it was a very warm day, and one of the only options that I could find was this acai bowl place. Considering I'm vegan, you'd probably expect me to have like a million acai bowls in my life, but it was actually my first time trying an acai bowl. It was good, but to be honest, it was a bit warm, and I'm pretty certain that acai bowls are supposed to be like cold, like almost like a smoothie bowl. So I was a bit taken back by that, and also the hemp seeds were pretty overpowering. I wish it had chia seeds because I think that would have complemented the dish a lot more. So because of those things, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. The last meal of the day that I had was some Ethiopian food. I heard a few people saying that it was like 50% off, so I was like, okay, bet, I'm gonna have some Ethiopian food. That kind of helped me get something a bit more healthier in during the day, so I wasn't complaining. But one thing that did catch me off guard was that I had already ordered my food, and then while I had the food in my hand after she already prepared it, she then decided to tell me that it was cash only, and I don't carry cash. Like I didn't have cash on me at that time. Obviously it would be smart to have cash, but I just didn't, and it would have been nice to know that before I ordered because I wouldn't have had to ask my friend to spot me, and then I had to e-transfer her, and it was just like this whole thing. The food for that was really good, but I got it to go, and I didn't get a video of this, but because of the way that the to-go container was shaped, it was like an oval, and she kind of had to like put different dishes on top of each other, like different side dishes, and that kind of mixed all of the flavors together and made it a bit more unappealing. So that kind of sucked, but overall it was still good. But because of that, I'm giving it a 7 out of 10. I believe the only entertainment for the event was inside of VIP because they had an entire stage with DJs, performers, and entertainers. I think in the general section there might have been a DJ, but I think that was it. So I could definitely see how that might be a bit disappointing for people who wanted to be in the general section. In previous event locations, everything was just open. There was no such thing as like VIP, so I could see why people would be disappointed with that this year. I personally really liked last year's setup just because the stage was at one end and then there was like an entire field. So if you didn't want to be super close to the stage on this side, you could just walk over here and eat over here, where you could still like talk to people and not have the music blaring in your ears. So let's definitely just say that my sensory issues thanked me for bringing earplugs. Now let's get into the event pros and cons. I'm going to start with the cons just because I mentioned a few of them throughout the duration of the video and I want to end on a positive note. So let's get into those. So the first con that I had is that the customer service lady that helped me with my media passes mentioned that there aren't always media wristbands available, which I found very odd considering media is pretty important. Like you're getting free media from a lot of creators, so I think it's really important to have those media bands ready and available for the people who need to shoot content within the actual event. This is especially an issue because if you don't have a media pass, you're not able to access every single part of the event, so then you're not able to actually do your job properly. So it didn't happen to me, and thankfully I was able to get a wristband, but I could see how this would be annoying for future creators or even people that they've hired to shoot content. I think it's really important to have those available. Number 2 was the ground of the venue. I kind of felt like the general part of Vegandale was in like a very large parking lot. I heard some people say that it gave the event kind of like a cold and unwelcoming feeling, and I could definitely see where they're coming from with that. Last year the venue was in an absolutely gorgeous space which had tons of grass, shade, and it just had a really good vibe, and it still had a view of the CN Tower. So to be honest, I really did enjoy the past venue more, and I'm really hoping that Vegandale Toronto 2024 will be in the same venue as last year. That leads me into the next view because there was a lack of shade in the general area, which is pretty problematic considering there are families there, and also there were no water refill stations, and also there was no shade for the most part in the general sections, which is pretty problematic. Especially when you put those all together, I feel like that could be a recipe for disaster, especially because it was so warm and the concrete just accentuated that. Last year there were amazing water refill sections and a lot of shade and also grass, so people could lay down their picnic blankets and just talk in groups and overall enjoy the event more, and I think that's what people really missed the most. I think these factors kind of came together and overall created a colder, kind of sterile almost environment, because it definitely felt like there was a little bit less community than last year. Number 6 I mentioned briefly, and it is that I don't think there was enough healthy and fresh options. I think this is kind of ironic if you think about it, because usually a lot of vegans value their health and wellness, so to see it mostly filled with junk was kind of frustrating a little bit, because I was one of those people looking for something a bit healthier, and it was a struggle to find that. Number 7 is access issues, and that's because the location was much more accessible last year. This year, I would say it was a bit more remote, and there was also construction happening in the area, which made it harder for people to access the event in general. And then when you were leaving, it was a nightmare, and the traffic was just pretty bad. Number 8 is something I didn't really know about. VIP wasn't letting people back in after a certain time. Obviously, since I had a media pass, I would most likely be able to get back in, but not everyone I was with had a media pass, which made it kind of frustrating. I could have gotten back in, but I don't think they could have, so it was just kind of pointless for me. And I think that if people pay extra for VIP, they should be able to come and go as they please. Excuse me if that's inaccurate, because my friend told me that and I didn't really look much into it considering I left after the general part closed, but to my understanding, this is how the event went. So the ticket prices are $10 to $16, I believe, depending on the time that you want to enter. I'm very thankful that the Vegandale team gifted me some media passes free of charge so I can make some content, but no, I'm not sponsored by them, and all of these opinions are my own, so let's get back into it. I saw a comment in the Toronto Vegans Facebook page, and somebody said that it doesn't really make much sense to pay to go into a food festival to then have to keep paying for different forms of food. And I can totally see where they're coming from, considering the fact that it is a festival and a lot of these vendors are hiking up their prices to a premium because of this. I could definitely understand where people are coming from, considering that Vegandale happened a few weeks before Vegandale, and it was completely free of charge to get in. The last one is washrooms. The only way that you had access to anything other than a porta potty was to pay extra to access VIP. I also heard a lot of people complaining about this because Vegandale was a completely free event and there were still proper washrooms there, so that's totally valid and I can see where they're coming from with that. Let's go ahead and end on a positive note, so let's get into the pros. First one was easy entry. I thankfully arrived early, and I planned this in advance to do this intentionally so that I didn't have to wait in a bunch of lines, and it worked out perfectly for me. Number 2 is key vendors. They had a lot of key vendors that are always really popular every year, so I think a lot of people enjoyed seeing those vendors, and I certainly did as well. Number 3 was VIP access. If you are going to divide up the event like that, I am overall happy that I had access to VIP so I could get water, use the washroom, sit down in the shade, and enjoy my food. Number 4 was the venue, and even though I liked last year's venue more, I still thought that this year's venue was pretty lovely. It might have been because I spent majority of the time inside of Cabana and I really enjoyed Cabana's aesthetic, but it was a fun experience overall to change it up and have them test out different vendors. Number 5 was the ambiance and views. I loved being close to the water and having a view of the CN Tower. Not only was it a lovely view, but it also cooled down the venue a little bit, which I think a lot of people appreciated. I was so happy because on the boardwalk I spotted a proposal and it was just really cute and it totally made my day. Overall, I did have a good time at Vegandale, but I also want to keep in mind that I was in VIP, so I probably had a better experience than a lot of people who attended. Despite the cons, I would still recommend that people check out out the event because you are bound to find things that you enjoy while you're at the event. And I also think it's important for everyone to form their own opinion and get their own experience there. If you attended Vegandale Toronto 2023, I would love to hear from you. I want to hear your opinions and experiences and thoughts on what they could do next year to improve your experience as well. As I mentioned, I will be attending Vegandale LA this month as well, so be sure to subscribe and follow so you don't miss out on that content. Like always, thank you so much for being here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.